Ms. B.
Hello, how are you guys? Welcome to Aaron channel. Before continuing to the storyline, please give your support first by subscribing. Okay, now let's continue. This is the in-depth storyline of the video Your Husband is Mine. Okay, now we start the story. This video tells about a wife who disguises herself as a maid to steal the fiancé from the woman who killed her husband.
3 years ago, a tragedy buried in rain and blood destroyed Vivian's life. Her husband, Martin, was a loyal chauffeur for the wealthy Hoffman family, and they were expecting their first child. However, Martin stumbled upon a dark secret that threatened the reputation of Sabrina Hoffman, the ruthless heiress. To protect herself, Sabrina murdered Martin in cold blood, and the resulting trauma caused Vivian to lose her unborn baby. As Martin begged for his life and the life of his child, Sabrina showed no mercy, laughing as she destroyed a family to keep her secrets buried. Standing over her husband's grave, Vivian vowed that she would not just grieve, she would avenge. She stripped away her old identity, burying the sweet, innocent housewife she used to be along with her husband. She swore that Sabrina Hoffman would lose everything she held dear, starting with the man she intended to marry. In the years that followed, Vivian reinvented herself as Miss V, the mysterious and highly sought-after queen seductress of the New York underground elite. She mastered the psychology of desire, manipulation, and control. In a twist of cruel irony, Sabrina Hoffman, unaware that Miss V was the widow of the man she killed, hired her. Sabrina needed help because her fiancé, Damien Vale, the richest man in the city, was cold and distant, refusing to touch her even after 3 years of engagement. Vivian accepted the job, taking Sabrina's money to teach her how to seduce Damien, while secretly planning to use those very skills to steal him away. It was the perfect Trojan horse strategy. The enemy was inviting her right through the front gates. To infiltrate the Vale mansion, Vivian adopted a new persona, a humble, shy maid with a horrific scar covering half her face. She arrived for the interview wearing a veil, playing the part of a timid servant perfectly. Sabrina, looking for a personal maid for Damien, was initially dismissive of all the beautiful candidates, fearing they would tempt her feet. However, when Vivian removed her veil to reveal the ghastly scar, a masterful makeup job, Sabrina was delighted. She believed that no man, especially the fastidious Damien Vale, would ever look twice at a woman with such a disfigurement. Believing Vivian to be safe and repulsive, Sabrina hired her on the spot, unknowingly welcoming her worst nightmare into her home. Once inside, Vivian began a high-stakes game of psychological warfare. She didn't rely on overt beauty. She used subtlety. She left traces of her presence that confused and intrigued Damien, a lingering scent, a solved chess problem that he had been stuck on, and notes that seemed to come from Sabrina but didn't match Sabrina's personality. When Sabrina tried to take credit for Vivian's intelligence, Damien saw through the cracks. The tension escalated when Vivian accidentally ended up in the study, wearing Damien's shirt after a laundry mishap. Damien, usually cold and untouchable, found himself strangely drawn to the scarred maid who challenged him intellectually and seemed to understand his desires better than his own fiancé. Sabrina, sensing her grip on Damien loosening but unable to pinpoint why, decided to assert dominance through cruelty. She framed Vivian for theft, planting a diamond anklet in the study and claiming Vivian stole it. When Vivian denied it, Sabrina ordered her guards to restrain the maid. In a display of pure sadism, Sabrina whipped Vivian, demanding she beg for mercy. But Vivian refused to break. She took the lashes silently, knowing that her scars, both real and fake, would serve as a weapon. She endured the torture, waiting for the perfect moment to spring her trap, calculating that Damien would return home at exactly 11:45 a.m. from his golf trip. Right on cue, Damien walked in to find his fiancée brutally whipping a helpless maid. The sight shattered whatever patience he had left for Sabrina. He stopped the assault immediately, demanding an explanation. When it was revealed that the anklet was actually a gift Damien had bought for someone else, and thus Sabrina lied about it being hers, the tables turned instantly. Damien didn't just stop the abuse. He sided with the maid. He ordered Sabrina the hoti eristu apologize to Vivian. It was a humiliating defeat for Sabrina, who was forced to say sorry to the scar-faced freak. As Damien tended to Vivian's wounds, the dynamic shifted permanently. The hunter had become the prey, and Damien Vale was now looking at his maid, not with disgust, but with a protective, burning intensity. The silence that followed Sabrina's forced apology was heavy, filled with the static electricity of shifting power. Vivian sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, clutching her torn uniform to her chest, her breathing ragged. The physical pain from the whip was real, a stinging, burning line of fire across her back, but the satisfaction in her heart was a soothing balm that numbed the agony. She watched through lowered lashes as Sabrina stood there, trembling with impotent rage, her face a mask of humiliated fury. For 3 years, Vivian had dreamed of this moment. She had dreamed of seeing the woman who destroyed her life stripped of her dignity. But this was just the appetizer. As Damien stood between them, his back to Sabrina and his focus entirely on Vivian, a dark realization settled in the room. The king had chosen his queen, and it wasn't the woman wearing the engagement ring. Vivian allowed a single, perfect tear to slide down her cheek, not from pain, but as a calculated piece of theater to seal the deal. Damien looked down at the maid, this Vivian who had disrupted the cold, sterile order of his life. He was a man of logic, of business, of hard lines and harder decisions. He didn't do emotions. He didn't do saving damsels. Yet, seeing the red wheels on her pale skin ignited a fury in his gut that terrified him. Why did he care? She was just a servant, a scarred, quiet thing that flitted around his house like a ghost. But when she looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet, he saw a depth there that he had never seen in Sabrina's vacant, greedy gaze. He saw resilience. He saw a mirror of his own hidden loneliness. He reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder, hesitant for the first time in years. "Go to your room," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I will have the doctor sent up." It wasn't a request. It was a command born of a sudden, fierce need to protect what he was beginning to consider his. Sabrina watched them, her fingernails digging into her palms until the skin broke. She saw the way Damien looked at the maid, that intense, brooding focus that she had spent millions trying to buy from Miss V. She had paid the queen seductress a fortune to teach her how to get that look, and here was this ugly, scarred nobody getting it for free. A scream built in her throat, but she swallowed it down like bile. If she screamed now, she would look crazy. She would look exactly like the monster Vivian was painting her to be. She's playing him, Sabrina thought, her paranoia sharpening into clarity. That maid is playing him. But who would believe her? To the world, Sabrina was the jealous, spoiled heiress, and Vivian was the victim. Sabrina realized, with a chilling dread, that she had let a viper into her bed, and now it was coiling around her neck. Later that night, the Vale mansion was quiet, settling into the uneasy peace of a ceasefire. Vivian lay in her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling. She removed the prosthetic scar from her cheek carefully, wincing as the adhesive pulled at her skin. Beneath the makeup, her face was flawless, the face of the queen seductress. She looked at herself in the small, handheld mirror. One step closer. Martin, she whispered to the darkness. She's scared. I can smell it. The physical wounds on her back throbbed, a reminder of the price she was paying. But pain was a currency Vivian was rich in. She applied a soothing ointment, her mind already racing to the next move on the chessboard. Sabrina would try to retaliate. A narcissist never took defeat. Lying down, Vivian needed to escalate the intimacy with Damien before Sabrina could regroup. She needed to move from object of pity to object of desire. The next morning, the atmosphere in the dining room was frigid enough to freeze water. Damien sat at the head of the table, reading a financial report, ignoring the breakfast spread before him. Sabrina sat to his right, pushing a piece of melon around her plate, her eyes darting nervously toward the kitchen door. When Vivian entered to refill the coffee, the air left the room. She moved with a slight limp but Effectivan kept her head bowed. She poured Damien's coffee with a steady hand, the aroma of the rich roast filling the silence. "How is your back?" Damien asked, without looking up from his paper. The question was casual, but the stillness of his body gave him away. He was waiting for the answer. "It is healing, sir." "Thank you for asking," Vivian replied, her voice soft and melodic. Sabrina slammed her fork down. "Damien, really? We're eating." Damien lowered the paper, turning his cold gray eyes onto his fiancée. "Yes, we are. And I am asking a member of my staff about an injury inflicted under my roof. Do you have a problem with that, Sabrina?" His tone was a warning shot. Sabrina shrank back, muttering a denial. She couldn't fight him when he was like this. She needed help. She needed Miss V. "I need to call her," Sabrina thought, frantically. "I need to know how to handle a man who is obsessed with pity." The irony was delicious to Vivian, who was standing right there filling the water glass. Sabrina was going to call her to ask how to defeat her. It was a circle of manipulation so perfect it almost made Vivian smile. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep her expression neutral. "I will be in the study," Damien announced, standing up. "Vivian, bring my schedule in 10 minutes. In the study, the dynamic shifted from master and servant to something far more dangerous. Vivian entered, closing the heavy oak door behind her. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and Damien's cologne sandalwood and steel. He was standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. "You didn't steal the anklet," he stated, not turning around. "I know that." Vivian walked closer, stopping just inside his personal space. "I would never steal from you, sir. I have everything I need." It was a double-edged sentence. To him, it sounded humble. To her, it meant she was stealing his heart, which was all she needed. Damien turned, his eyes landing on her face, tracing the line of the fake scar. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "Sabrina is cruel. The work is hard. Why stay here?" This was the moment. The hook. Vivian looked up, letting her mask slip just a fraction, revealing a glimpse of the intelligent, passionate woman beneath the servant's garb. "Because," she whispered, stepping a fraction closer, "sometimes, amidst the cruelty, there are moments of safety. You saved me yesterday. No one has ever saved me before." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and brushed a piece of lint from his lapel. It was a bold move, a breach of protocol. Damien froze. He should have pulled away. He should have fired her. But he didn't. He looked at her hand on his chest, feeling the heat of it through his shirt. For a man who had been starved of genuine affection, who was surrounded by people who only wanted his money, that touch was electric. "Safety," he repeated, the word tasting strange on his tongue. The phone in Vivian's pocket vibrated, breaking the spell. She stepped back, bowing her head. "I should go, sir. Miss Hoffman will be looking for me." She left the room, leaving Damien standing there, confused and aroused, his heart hammering against his ribs. Once, in the hallway, Vivian checked her phone. It was a text from Sabrina. "I need an emergency session, Miss V. My fiancé's losing his mind over a maid. Help me." Vivian smirked. The game continued. She went to the servants' quarters to change into her Miss Vida Skyza wig, dark glasses, and a voice modulator app she used for calls. She dialed Sabrina. "Hello?" Darlie, she purred into the phone. "Trouble in paradise. It's a nightmare." Sabrina shrieked into the phone. "He defended her. He made me apologize. You have to tell me what to do. How do I get his attention back?" Vivian leaned back in her chair, twirling a lock of hair around her finger. "Listen closely, Sabrina. Men like Damien, they hate desperation, but they love mystery. You need to play hard to get. Ignore him. Be cold. Show him you don't care about the maid." It was terrible advice. Vivian knew that Damien responded to warmth and vulnerability, the exact things Vivian was providing. By telling Sabrina to be cold, she was pushing Damien further away. "Ignore him?" Sabrina asked, doubtful. "Are you sure?" "I am the queen seductress," Vivian said icily. "Do you want to question me? Or do you want to win?" Sabrina swallowed her doubt. "Okay. I'll do it. I'll be ice." Vivian hung up, dismantling her phone setup. She returned to her Vivian persona and went to the kitchen. The plan was working perfectly. Sabrina would spend the next few days being distant and arrogant, widening the chasm between her and Damien. Meanwhile, Vivian would fill that void with warmth, hot tea, and listening ears. She was rewriting the narrative of Damien's life, editing Sabrina out one page at a time. But she had to be careful. Sabrina was volatile. If she felt she was truly losing, she wouldn't just get angry. She would get violent again. And next time, Damien might not be there to stop the whip. Days turned into a week. The tension in the house was palpable. Sabrina followed Miss V's advice religiously, offering Damien the cold shoulder, refusing to engage in conversation, and spending her time shopping or locked in her room. She thought she was creating mystery. In reality, Damien felt relieved. The silence allowed him to focus on the one person who was paying attention to him. Vivian. He found himself seeking her out. He created excuses to work from home. He asked for coffee at odd hours, just to see her walk through the door. He found himself staring at the scar on her face, wondering what the skin beneath it felt like, wondering who had hurt her, wondering if he could kill the person who did it. One rainy afternoon, Damien found Vivian in the library, dusting the high shelves. She was stretching, her uniform riding up slightly, revealing the curve of her waist. Damien watched from the doorway, a hunger gnawing at him that had nothing to do with food. "You shouldn't be climbing ladders with a bad back," he said, startling her. Vivian gasped, the feather duster slipping from her hand. Damien moved with the speed of a predator, catching the duster before it hit the floor, his body pressing against hers as he steadied the ladder. They were inches apart. The smell of rain and old books enveloped them. Vivian looked down at him, her breath hitching. This wasn't part of the plan, or was it? The chemistry was undeniable, dangerous, and real. "I am fine, sir," she whispered, not moving away. "I am used to pain." Damien's eyes darkened. "You shouldn't have to be here," reached up his hand, hovering near her cheek, near the scar. He wanted to touch it. He wanted to understand the tragedy of her. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low and gritty. Vivian's mind raced. She needed a story that would bind him to her, someone who claimed to love me. She lied, the words, weaving a web of sympathy. He wanted to mark me so no one else would want me. A growl rumbled in Damien's chest. The thought of another man hurting her made him see red. He was wrong, Damien said, his thumb brushing her jawline just below the fake scar. It doesn't make you unwanted. It makes you unforgettable. The moment was shattered by the sound of high heels clicking on the hardwood floor in the hallway. Sabrina? Vivian pulled away instantly, descending the ladder and bowing her head. Damien stepped back, composing himself, but the heat in the room lingered. Sabrina walked in, looking between them with narrowed eyes. "What is going on here?" she demanded, breaking her vow of silence. "Just cleaning, Miss Hoffman," Vivian said quickly, scurrying toward the door. Sabrina blocked her path. "You missed a spot," she sneered, pointing to a perfectly clean table. "Do it again." Damien opened his mouth to argue, but Vivian caught his eye and gave a tiny shake of her head. "Let her win the battle." Her eyes sighed. "We will win the war." Damien stormed out, unable to watch Sabrina's pettiness without exploding. He went to his private gym, taking his frustration out on the punching bag. Thud, thud, thud. With every strike, he pictured his lengthy, empty engagement, the cold house, the lies, and then he pictured Vivian, her quiet strength, her soft voice, the way she looked at him as if he were a man, not a bank account. He realized he was in trouble. He was falling for a maid, a scarred, broken maid with no history and no future. And the terrifying part was, he didn't care. He wanted her. He wanted to tear up the prenup, tear up the engagement, and start over. But he couldn't just throw Sabrina out. The Hoffman and Vale business empires were entangled. He needed a way out that didn't destroy his company. Vivian knew the business entanglement was the final hurdle. She spent her nights researching the merger deals, the stocks, the hidden clauses. She wasn't just a seductress, she was Martin's wife. And Martin had heard things in that car. She knew where the bodies were buried literally and metaphorically. She knew that the Hoffman fortune was built on a house of cards, specifically an illegal offshore account that Sabrina used to launder money. If Vivian could get the ledger, she could hand Damien the key to his freedom. But the ledger was in Sabrina's safe, and only Sabrina had the combination. Vivian needed to get close to the enemy. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Sabrina, frustrated by her cold shoulder tactic failing, decided to host a masquerade ball. A return to society, she called it. She wanted to parade Damien around and mark her territory. She ordered Vivian to help her dress in the opulent master bedroom. Surrounded by silk gowns, Vivian played the role of the dutiful servant. "You look stunning, Miss Hoffman," Vivian said, lacing up Sabrina's corset. "Mr. Vale won't be able to take his eyes off you." Sabrina preened in the mirror. "I know. Miss V said I needed to make a grand re-entrance. Tonight, I'm going to announce the wedding date. No more delays. The wedding date." The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. She couldn't let that happen. Once the date was public, it would be harder to stop. She needed to ruin this ball. She looked at the vanity table, where Sabrina's jewelry box sat open. Inside, tucked beneath a velvet cushion, was a small silver key. The key to the safe. Vivian's heart hammered. It was a risk, a massive risk. But if she didn't take it, she might lose Damien forever. "Miss Hoffman, I think you forgot your earrings in the guest bathroom," Vivian lied smoothly. "Shall I get them?" "Go." Sabrina waved her hand. "And be quick." As soon as Sabrina turned to the mirror, Vivian palmed the key. She moved to the bathroom, grabbed the earrings, and returned, slipping the key into her pocket. The adrenaline was dizzying. Throughout the night, while the masquerade ball raged downstairs, music swelling, champagne flowing, Damien looking miserable in a tuxedo, Vivian was upstairs, executing the heist. She located the safe behind a painting in Sabrina's private office. She used the key. Inside were stacks of cash, jewelry, and a black leather book. The ledger. Vivian grabbed it, her hands shaking. This was it. The proof of the Hoffman crimes. The proof that would send Sabrina to prison, just like she deserved. But escaping the room wasn't easy. The door handle turned. Vivian froze. She had nowhere to hide. The room was sparse. She slid under the heavy mahogany desk just as the door opened. It was Sabrina and a man. Not Damien. Vivian held her breath. "You have to be patient," a male voice whispered. It sounded like one of the board members. "Damien is suspicious. If he finds out we've been siphoning funds from the merger." "He won't find out," Sabrina hissed. "He's distracted by that maid. He's an idiot. Once we're married, I'll control his shares, and we can push him out." Vivian's eyes widened. It wasn't just laundering. It was a coup. Sabrina was planning to steal Damien's company. Vivian recorded the conversation on her phone, her heart pounding so loud she feared they would hear it. This was better than the ledger. This was conspiracy. This was betrayal. After they left, Vivian waited 10 minutes before creeping out. She returned the key to the jewelry box before Sabrina returned to change. She had everything she needed, but she couldn't just hand it to Damien yet. She needed the maximum impact. She needed to destroy Sabrina in public, just as Sabrina had tried to destroy her. The masquerade ball was still going on. It was the perfect stage. Vivian went to her room and shed the maid's uniform. She pulled out a hidden suitcase. Inside was a gown, breathtaking, blood-red silk gown that clung to every curve. She removed the fake scar. She applied bold, dark makeup. She put on a gold domino mask. Vivian was gone. The queen seductress had arrived. She walked down the grand staircase, the red dress flowing like liquid fire. The ballroom went silent. No one recognized the maid. They only saw a goddess. Damien, standing by the bar with a drink, looked up. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered. He didn't know who she was, but his soul recognized her. Vivian walked straight to Damien. "May I have this dance?" she asked, her voice low and sultry, devoid of the timid accent she used as a maid. Damien was mesmerized. "Who are you?" he breathed, taking her hand. "Your future," she whispered. They danced. It was a tango of tension and desire. Sabrina watched from the balcony, fuming. Who was this woman? Why was Damien looking at her like that? Jealousy consumed her. She stormed down the stairs to interrupt them. "Get your hands off my fiancé," Sabrina shrieked, grabbing Vivian's arm. Vivian stopped dancing. She turned to Sabrina, her eyes flashing behind the mask. "Your fiancé," Vivian laughed. "The man you plan to bankrupt, the man whose company you're stealing." The music stopped. The crowd gasped. Sabrina paled. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Vivian reached up and slowly untied the mask. She let it drop to the floor. Then, she reached into her clutch and pulled out the recorder. She pressed play into the microphone of the band. Sabrina's voice echoed through the ballroom. "He's an idiot. Once we're married, I'll control his shares." The room erupted in whispers. Damien stared at Sabrina, his face turning to stone. Is this true? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. Sabrina stammered, looking for an escape. It's AI. It's fake. She's a liar. But then Vivian played the trump card. And this, she held up the ledger, is the record of the money you stole. From him, from your investors, from everyone. She handed the book to Damien. He opened it, scanning the pages. The betrayal was absolute. He looked at Sabrina with pure disgust. We're done, he said. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Sabrina lunged at Vivian. You ruined everything. Who are you? Vivian smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. You don't remember me? 3 years ago, a rainy night, a driver named Martin. Sabrina stopped, her eyes going wide with recognition and horror. No. You're dead. You died with the baby. The baby died, Vivian said, her voice cracking for the first time. I survived, and I crawled out of hell to drag you back into it. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Damien had signaled security. Sabrina tried to run, but the guards blocked the exits. She was trapped. She looked at Damien, begging. Damien, please. She's a prostitute. She's Miss V. She tricked you. Damien looked at Vivianat. The woman in the red dress. The woman with the scar now gone. The woman who had cleaned his library and stolen his heart. She didn't trick me, Damien said softly. She saved me. As the police dragged Sabrina away, screaming and cursing, the ballroom slowly cleared. The guests were ushered out. The music had stopped. It was just Damien and Vivian standing in the center of the empty floor. The silence was heavy, filled with the ghosts of the past 3 years. Damien looked at her. Really looked at her. You lied to me, he said, about who you were. I did, Vivian admitted. I had to. Was any of it real? He asked. The library? The study? The way you looked at me? Vivian stepped closer. The lie was the scar, she said. The lie was the uniform. But the way I feel when I'm near you, that was the only true thing in my life. She waited, terrified he would reject her now that the vengeance was over. Damien reached out and took her hand, the hand that had held the duster, the hand that had held the ledger. He pulled her close. Then stay, he whispered. No more masks. No more games. Just us. Vivian rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heart. The vengeance was complete. Martin was avenged. Sabrina was gone, but for the first time in 3 years, Vivian didn't feel the need to run or fight or scheme. She felt peace. She looked up at Damien, the man who had been a pawn and became a partner. Just us, she agreed. And as he kissed her, under the lights of the crystal chandelier, the queen seductress retired, and Vivian finally, truly, came home.
progression.